Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting a tropical hammock and I'm going to be sipping on a little bit of spiked seltzer. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for the materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 canvas. You could certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. The colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, Mars black, green oxide, fire red, deep yellow, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, and this is burnt sienna, which I'll call rust. And of course you can switch up those colors, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using 3 brushes today. The brushes are a 1/2 inch wide bristle brush, a number 8 round brush, and a number 1 round brush, and I'll refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. You'll also need a cup of water for washing your brushes, and you're going to need a paper towel for drying your brushes. And I'm going to be providing you with some additional resources down below this video. One of them is a link where you could purchase this entire kit, the same materials I'm using, from the exact colors to the brushes and everything in between. It's convenient and affordable, so that's down there for you. But there's also a free downloadable image of the final painting, so you could print that and use it as a visual reference as you go along, as well as written step-by-step instructions that you can print out and use those as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so the first step that we're going to do is we're going to paint the sky. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush, and I'm going to be using blue and white. I'm going to be painting it with a left to right brush stroke, and I'm going to attempt to get my sky lighter as it comes down towards my horizon. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to kind of mark off how far down I want my sky to go. So I'm just going to put a little bit of blue and a little bit of white on my brush at the same time. And I want this to come down about 2/3 of the way. So how you can kind of determine where 2/3 is without using a pencil or without using a ruler is you can just kind of eyeball your halfway mark and then eyeball about halfway between here and here. And then just go up a little, and that'll get you in the ballpark of about 1/3 of the way up your canvas. Then you can use your brush as a measuring tool, and wherever you made that mark on this side, you stick your finger to your brush, and you come over to the right side, and you can make a mark at the same spot. Now you don't even need to draw a line, you just have your visual reference points as to where to stop as you come down that sky. So I still have just blue and white on my brush. I'm going to start at the top using a left to right brush stroke, and I like to paint the edges of my canvas for a couple of reasons. For the first reason is when I paint the top, I get a good glimpse as to what that color is going to be, so I can tell myself, oh, do I want to make it lighter or darker? And the second reason why I paint the edges is so my painting is all nice and complete by the time I am done. So that way I don't have to put a frame around it or anything like that. So as I'm coming down this sky, I continue to use a left to right brush stroke, and I'm still kind of picking up the blue and the white right now, but as I'm coming down, I'm going to stop picking up blue, and I'm just going to be picking up white. And what's going to happen is my sky is going to naturally get lighter and lighter as it comes down my canvas, and it'll get a nice light color by the time it hits the horizon line. And as you're doing this, you can picture it to be a nice, beautiful summer day. I myself am imagining this to have no clouds in the sky. It is just a beautiful, crisp summer day. Maybe it's in the tropics somewhere. Maybe it's the middle of the summer. Whatever you imagine it to be, feel free to have that in your head as you're doing this. Maybe you've you know, you start daydreaming a little bit is kind of what I do every now and again, especially as I'm just doing this very relaxing paint stroke going across. And I just ran into that wet blue. That's okay. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to it to get it to be a nice light color. And I want it to come all the way down to that area, making sure that I do paint the entire sky. Just putting my head back here a little bit, making sure I have the top dark enough.Maybe I'll add a little bit more blue up there if I want a larger transition. But what I do at the end is I'm just going to go back and forth, up and down this sky, just so I can get all these strokes to kind of blend in with one another. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. And this helps you if you missed any spots. You'll naturally get them covered this way. So we're going to use this same brush for the next step, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it in preparation for that next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step, we are painting our water and our beach. We're going to be using our large bristle brush, and the colors we're using are blue and white, brown, and yellow. And how we're going to do this is we're going to make a couple of dots, and we're going to kind of separate them first, and then we'll get into painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large brush, and I'm going to put brown paint on it. So you don't need a lot, just a tiny bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make my 2 dots for my horizon line. So when we're doing this, we have to make sure that the horizon line is 100% in the sky. So if that bottom of your sky is kind of wobbly, you want to make sure that this mark that we make is as high as the part that is the most unpainted. So if that's about that high, I can always use my brush and come to the left-hand side. I can make a mark right there. I always use my brush as my little ruler. It's my fancy ruler. And then I'm going to go over on this side. Your mark should be pretty similar to those first marks, but sometimes it shifts a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another mark about halfway between this one and the bottom of my canvas. So somewhere right about there. And then I'm going to make a third mark about an inch or so on the left-hand side into the bottom of the canvas, just something like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these 2 bottom dots with a jaggedy line. So I don't want a lot of paint on my brush, it's just that brown paint. And I'm going to go left to right, and I'm just going to faintly do this kind of what's going to be the separation between our water and our ocean, our water and our beach. And I don't wash my brush. I'm going to go right into doing the horizon line. So I'm going to pick up more brown and blue. So I have brown and blue on my brush at the same time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these 2 dots. I am right-handed, so it's easier for me to start on the right and go to the left, but you might be able to go from the left to the right, whatever way you want. Couple of tips for you. What I do, I have a shaky hand, so I brace my hand on my canvas so that holds my hand steady. I'm going to push my brush into my canvas so that way it provides me with a nice clean line at the top. And when I go to do this line, I'm going to keep my eye on the prize, which is the other dot. And if you run out of paint, don't worry, you can pick up a little bit more halfway through, or you can just kind of add it later, whatever is easiest for you. So here we go. And if you run into wet paint on your sky, don't worry about it. Just paint it right in. So here we go. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to keep my eye on the prize, which is the other dot. You can see I'm going right through wet paint. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to pull it right over until I meet this other mark. I'm going to pick up more blue and brown because I know I want the top of my horizon line to be nice and dark. So I'm just kind of reinforcing that darkness with a little bit more blue and brown. And this is also going to help me do any little adjustments that I need. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up blue and white. And I'm going to be going left to right in my ocean. I'm going to get the ocean to be lighter as it comes towards the beach. So I don't have much area to go, so I don't really need to pick up blue or brown again. I'm just gonna start picking up white. And the same thing that happened with my sky is gonna happen with my water, which means it's gonna naturally get lighter and lighter as it comes towards the beach. And, you know, as you're doing this, you can kind of get lost in your ocean. You know, imagine that there's some dolphins flipping off in the distance, or you're hearing some seagulls off in the sky. You know, that's the beauty of painting. You just get to sit here and enjoy the process and kind of daydream and, you know, imagine this to be that beautiful tropical place that you've wanted to go on vacation to, you know. And I'm just kind of bringing this all the way down to where that water, where the brown edge is that we made. I'm still just going kind of left to right. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. You can have little white caps in there, but when I do get to that brown part, I'm going to start wiggling my brush left to right so I don't have a really clean line when it meets that beach. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly wash and dry my brush before I start putting the beach colors on. So that way I don't have blue, too much blue in my beach. So I'm just going to kind of wash it real quick, you know, and then I'm going to be using white, brown, and yellow for my beach color. My trick here is I do not use a lot of paint. So I am just adding just a teeny tiny bit of white, an even smaller amount of yellow because I know how vibrant yellow is, and just a teeny tiny touch of brown. And this you can do with dots, you can do with swirls, really whatever kind of wiggle of your brush or stroke of your brush that allows you to get a nice even coat throughout here, that's going to work. It's such a small space, it doesn't have to be perfect. And when I get to where the water is, I want these two things, which is the sand and the water, to look like they belong together. So I am going to kind of push some of my sand into the water so that way it ends up looking like they're kind of intermingling with each other. And I'm just going to kind of keep up this process until I get the whole area covered. And if you have some darker sand or some lighter sand, the darker sand is going to make it look like it's wetter. You can also take a little bit of white. I just put a little bit of white on my brush and put these little lighter areas as if there's almost like these little waves crashing in to the sand. If you have light next to dark, that's going to make it look more realistic, like there's almost the wave is kind of wetting the sand or bringing that sand back out into the sea. So have fun with this. Again, the trick is not a lot of paint. This is going to help you to kind of control how this ends up looking. And then when you do feel like you've got a good assortment of sand here, we are going to change brushes to our medium brush. So you can put this large brush away and take out your medium brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step, we are painting our tree trunks. I'm gonna be using my medium brush, and the colors that I'm gonna be using are black, brown, rust, and white. And I do wanna caution you that before you start this step, you do wanna make sure that your canvas is dry. So you could either, you know, just take a break, take a longer break, or you could, you know, blow on it, or you could just use a blow dryer. So whatever method you want to do, or maybe yours is already dry. So I am going to be doing a large tree on the right and a small tree on the left so we can give this a lot of perspective. My large tree on the right is going to go from the top of my canvas to the bottom of my canvas, and it's just going to be maybe about 2 or 3 inches away from the edge of my canvas. I do want each of my trees to resemble real trees. We're going for a semi-realistic look here. So every tree that I've ever seen is a little bit more narrow at the top than it is at the bottom. So when you're doing your tree, just make sure it's got, even though palm trees are really tall and slender, they always get just a smudge wider at the bottom. Some palm trees have big bubbles on the bottom, but we're not going to talk about those ones, or paint them for that matter. And then my other one is going to be much smaller, and it's going to be over on this side. So what I'm going to do, just so I can kind of get my brain straight and not forget where I want my trees, is I'm going to make some dots. So I'm going to put just black paint on my brush. I'm going to come over on the right side of the top, maybe 2 or 3 inches, make a mark there, and then just kind of come down in the same direction at the bottom and make myself a mark there. Now I know where that tree is gonna go. On this side, I'm gonna go maybe 2 or 3 inches from the left side of my canvas, and I wanna be about halfway between the top of my canvas and my horizon line. So somewhere right about here, I'm gonna come in about 2 inches, make myself a dot, bigger dot so you can see it, and then come down and make another dot down at the bottom. So now I know where my trees are gonna go. And I am going to do them in a succession of stripes from dark to light, and then I'm going to blend those stripes. So I'm going to go brown or black to brown to rust to white, and then I will blend. So here we go. I'm going to start on my right tree, and I'll do this tree fully, and then I'll work my way to that tree. And I'm going to just start at the top. I'm going to make myself a big, pretty thick black line, and you can see I kind of am attempting to kick it out just a little bit at the bottom so I can have it just a smudge wider at the bottom. Now I'm not washing my brush, I just picked up brown, and because I didn't wash my brush, they're gonna immediately just start to blend into one another. Now I'm picking up rust without washing my brush, and I'm just putting another stripe right next to it. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up white paint, and I'm going to do my white line, and my brush is dirty, so this white is not going to be 100% clean, but that's okay. That's what's going to add to the illusion of this. So now I'm going to start to make my bark, and how I'm going to do that, I don't know if my cup is in your way. We'll just move that out of the way. So I'm going to just do, like, pull this white into the brown in kind of a curved fashion. I'm not terribly concerned that they're going in the same exact direction or bend, because if I think about it too hard and make them all really look exactly the same, it's going to take away from the natural look to it. And there is all kinds of different barks on palm trees, that is. I think it's called bark. It's got to be bark, because it's only bark. There's just bark on trees. But some palm trees are smooth looking, which is where my confusion is coming into play here. So, but again, I'm having one side dark. You can pick up, if you feel like the light side's not light enough, you can certainly pick up a little bit more white, which I am doing because I want my light side to be a little bit lighter. And again, I'm just kind of pulling that brightness into the darkness and the darkness into the brightness, and I'm trying to get this to look pretty natural. And then once you feel like you've got this nice and accomplished, you can move right on to the next tree. But of course, I'm going to sit here and play for a minute. I mean, I know that some of these palm trees, they have almost like X's for their bark. Some of them are super smooth. I mean, there's a bunch of different varieties of palm trees. Oh, I like that. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to my next tree. I'm just wiping my brush off of my paper towel. You could wash it if you wanted to. And then again, I'm going to just start with black paint. I've got my black stripe going down. Now I'm going to go brown paint. This one I want to be a little bit more narrow than that one, because that one's nice and close. So I want that one to look a little bit bigger. So these are going to be a little bit more narrow strokes. And here goes my white. And now once I've got my white on there, now I'm going to start to get these curved bark marks on here. And again, you could have a whole bunch of fun and make this really detailed. But we're just really going for a nice kind of impressionistic / realist kind of look to this, where we've got some good shadow on one side and we've got some good highlight on the other side. And I am almost done here. I'm just trying to get rid of the vertical stripes is my kind of real goal. I'm not pressing hard. I'm just really using the tip of my brush. And again, if you feel like you want to add a little bit more white, feel free to do so, or a little bit more rust, whatever color is jumping out as a beautiful color to you, you can certainly go ahead and add it. And then we are going to use the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your bark all nice and realized onto your canvas, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step, we are using our medium brush and we are painting the wood for our hammocks. This is going to be the two wood pieces that, you know, are the support system for your hammock. So the colors that I'm going to be using are brown, rust, and yellow. And I'm going to use all three of those colors on my brush at the same time. So that way when I'm making the paint strokes, you'll have some dark spots and some light spots, and hopefully it'll kind of resemble a piece of wood. We're going to make two pieces of wood. One's going to be on the left, it's going to be smaller, and one's going to be on the right, it's going to be bigger. And I'm just going to give you little markers and we're going to paint them in, and then hopefully if you can just kind of follow the placement, you'll have a nice perspective on this. So again, I'm going to put yellow, brown, and rust all on my brush at the same time. We're going to do the one on the left first. This is going to be very close to your horizon, and it's only going to be maybe about 1/2 inch tall and about 2 inches wide. So I'm going to go maybe about 1/2 inch away from my horizon, maybe 1/4 inch away from my tree. So it's going to be very close to the tree. And then I'm just going to, so I don't put it too far over to the right, I'm literally just going to make myself a dot on the other side of it so I don't keep painting. And once I've got my 2 dots, I just connect them. Just like that. It doesn't even have to be a perfectly straight piece of wood. I don't need it to be really thick or, you know, tall, just real small. So once I have that one, now I've got to make my bigger one. And after I show you how to do this and you're looking at it and it looks really awkward because it's so huge, don't worry about it, because when we put the net onto the hammock, it'll look much better and the perspective will make a whole lot more sense. So what I'm going to do is over by my right tree, I'm going to come away from that right tree, maybe about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to make a vertical line that touches my horizon line, and it's going to be about 1 inch tall. So I'm going to make a vertical line pretty close to my tree. I want it to touch my horizon. That gives you a nice marker as to where it's going to go. Now what you're going to do is from the right side of this piece of wood, I want you to go over about another inch, 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to have you come up very little bit, maybe about 1/4 inch. Make yourself a dot, and then you're going to connect this dot to the bottom edge of that vertical line that you just made a second ago. So this is going to be a diagonal line that's going to connect these 2 markers. Okay. Now I'm going to make another vertical line that's going to be about the same height as that. So from this corner, I'm just going to go up about 1 inch, and you probably figured out you're going to connect those 2. And then you can just color in the middle. And again, it's okay if it's streaky. That's going to give you a better illusion that it is a piece of wood. You could add more brown or more yellow to it. You can stripe it up as much as you want. And that is going to be all we're going to do for that step. We are going to use this same brush for the next step, but you're going to have to wash it and dry it. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting our palm fronds, and we're going to be using our medium brush, and the colors we're using are black, green, rust, yellow, and white. So how I do my palm fronds, I can't say it too many times in a row, that's why I say it really slow. Palm fronds, palm fronds, palm palm fronds, palm fronds. Palm fronds, palm fronds, palm fronds. My God, I don't sound smart right now. I like to do kind of the stems of each big leaf first. So that kind of gives me a roadmap as to where I want to do them. And I am going to start them with black and green on my brush, because for me, I like to go from the dark color and work my way to the light when I'm doing something textured like this. So I am putting black and green on my brush at the same time, and I know that this resembles the top of my hammock. I am going to have like ropes and stuff that are going to connect them. So I don't necessarily want my palm frond to totally overtake this center area, but you can certainly have some long ones hanging. So here I go. I'm going to start, at the center of my palm tree, and I like where gravity takes over, and I like my palm trees to be wild and have lots of life to them. So I'm just going to make these going in different directions. The top of this palm tree is off of my canvas, so I'm just going to have the edges of some of these fronds just kind of drooping over. They don't all have to come right from here, so I'm just going to kind of maybe have some really long ones. Maybe I've got one somewhere over here. This is totally encapsulating the privacy of this person that is going to be on this hammock. And now that I have my roadmap, now I'm going to make the little leaves on each one. I'm still just going to start with black and green. This to me is going to be like my shadowy color. And they all have leaves that are going to come out from that stem. And to me, gravity always takes over. So you're going to have some that kind of go up, but the curve should naturally kind of fall down. And they can certainly overlap each other. Maybe you have one in the middle here that's just kind of smaller, which when we get to the highlights, you'll be able to kind of fill in the spaces a little bit. But I haven't even really reloaded my brush at this point from the green and the black. It's just kind of working its way and giving me a nice shadowy, dark base to put that vibrant color on. If you need to reload your brush, feel free to do so, but you can see I kind of go fast when I do this. I always kind of tell people when you're doing something like this, the more you think about it, the less, in my opinion, it's going to look natural. If you sit here and think, oh, I want one here and one here and one here, it might not look as natural as it can. Now what I do is I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just going to start picking up rust, yellow, and white. And I can use green too, but these are going to be my highlight colors. So I just pick them up on my brush at the same time. The trick here is you don't want to overblend. So as you're doing this, you can have a lot of paint on your brush, and you just kind of use the tip of your brush. As soon as you feel yourself kind of starting to run out, reload. And if it's turning to orange for you, reload with green, yellow, and white. So this really helps to give you a lot of dimension within the tree without having to do too much work. You can see I'm still showing some of that darkness in between the leaves, so to speak. And if you run into trouble, if you're going along and you're like, oh, the black is just still too wet and I'm having trouble getting it look the way I want to with the individual little leaves coming out, then blow dry it or give it a minute for that darkness to dry. But if you can use a lot of paint on your brush and just kind of almost tip it, that's not a good word, just lightly tap it in these strokes, that's what's going to allow that paint, that thick paint, to come off in almost independent looking leaves. And they can overlap. They don't all have to come out at exactly the same angle. You can see this one almost kind of has a split down the middle, which is really cool. And you can go lighter or darker. I just really want these to look like they have sunshine on them and that it's a beautiful summer day and that the sun is just highlighting these fronds. And maybe yours looks a little windy. Maybe you've got yours kind of going off to the side. Just imagine yours to be whatever you want it to be. I do take a minute on these because I want them to be, really full of life. I want it to scream that the sun is blaring on them. Maybe I've got a little one in through here that's just kind of overlapping. You can put these little tiny ones in the middle, and that's going to help you, again, to just add a little bit more dimension to it. The white is definitely your friend when it comes to doing these. So the more little speckles of white and yellow that you can get on those ends, the more it's gonna look natural. I'm digging this. I might just put a little bit more over here. And you know, again, this is one of those have fun kind of steps. It doesn't have to be exactly as mine. Just, you know, make yours as fluffy. Some palm trees, they have really distinct leaves on them. Some are really messy like this. I am definitely a wild Mother Nature kind of viewer. I like to see mine a little bit on the wilder side, so that's how I'm going to do that. And then we are going to switch brushes to our small brush after this step. So once you get your palm fronds all nice and filled in, you can put the medium brush away in your water cup, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting the net on our hammock. So I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using mostly white, but I'll also use a little bit of black because we're going to have part of it gray too. So while we're constructing this, the main goal is to get it so somebody's not going to fall out of it. So we're going to make sure that the netting is nice and kind of tight. I'm just going to guide you kind of one piece of string at a time, I guess. So I'm going to start with just white paint. One of my tricks to doing something like this is these small lines is I'm going to take my brush and I like to spin it on the side of my palette in my paint, and that's going to get me a nice pointy brush. And I do kind of reload my brush often, so I have a lot of paint on my brush and I don't push too hard. So we're going to connect the left corner of this piece of wood to the left bottom corner of this piece of wood using kind of the bottom part of a loop. You're going to want to come about halfway into your water with the bottom part of that loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of coming down like this. I'm going to hit my mark there, and I'm just going to kind of come back up onto this side. And now I've got myself a loop. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this left or the right corner of the left piece of wood to the right corner on the right piece of wood. And I'm going to do another loop. And this one can come, same thing, about halfway down your water, maybe a little bit less than halfway, but and about halfway between these two is kind of where the bottom part of your loop could go. So you could just kind of make yourself a little mark there. And then when you're coming off of this piece of wood, you want it to kind of be at a similar angle as this one. So that's what I'm going to kind of watch first, as I'm coming off of here, that I'm at a pretty similar angle to this one. And then my goal is to hit this and travel all the way up to there. So something like this, reloading my brush, and then I could even come from the right. You know, whatever way your brain works better, that's the way you should go. And now what I've got to do is I've got to connect this bottom part of this loop to here. But I kind of travel down this same line for a minute. So I'm going to start up in the corner, but I travel down the same line and I start to disconnect it, you know, maybe somewhere in through here. So I'm traveling down, I start to disconnect it right about there. And my eye is on the prize, which is over here. So I just want it to kind of be like a natural loop, like what would gravity do if it was, you know, making this hammock kind of sag in the middle. And now that I have that, what we're going to do is we're going to make the netting part to the side that is being illuminated by the sun. So for me, that's going to be the inside of the hammock. So for a moment, you have to actually pretend like you don't see this little line here. And we're just going to make a series of curved lines throughout this long kind of, almost looks like a Nike swoosh shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start up here. I'm going to make a whole bunch of curved lines that are, you know, pretty similarly spaced, but they don't have to be exact. And I'm just going to kind of keep my brain from ignoring that line, because if you start to see that line, it makes it tough to keep going in this section. And then I'm just going to kind of go the whole way until I get you know, into an area where you almost can't tell that I'm doing it anymore. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make another series of curved lines, only now I'm gonna go in this direction. Put a little one up there. And again, I'm gonna ignore that line. And the reason why I need to ignore it is because it can play tricks on your head and you'll start going at that same angle. So again, yours doesn't have to be exactly the same angle as mine, but if you can put a curve to it, that's gonna show this little crisscrossing motion, and it's also gonna give the illusion that the hammock is nice and sagged. And there's all kinds of hammocks. There's, you know, ones that have solid mesh in them. There's, you know, there's all kinds, but the biggest goal is they're just there to get you to relax, unwind, forget about life's stresses, whatever your life stresses may be. And that's our whole goal here. And then once I've got the light part of my canvas, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix myself a little bit of gray. So I'm gonna take some of my white, just section it off here and put a tiny touch of black in it. I don't need this to be super dark gray, but I do definitely want it to look different than the white. You could even use a little bit of brown in it if you wanted it to be like a warmer gray, but that's all. Oops, my blue's running away from me. So I just am getting my little light gray. And now what we're gonna do is the underside of the net, which is this area plus on top of what we just did. So you're gonna almost see some of these little light spots through this underside, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what I'd like you to first do, so you can get your brain straight, is you're gonna just re-identify this line here with your gray paint, so you can now visually see. And if yours isn't dark enough, I think I'm gonna add a little bit more black to mine just so it's a touch darker here. And your gray will get a little bit darker as it dries, but you wanna make sure you can see the difference. So I can see the difference now. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do curved lines. I'm gonna avoid making them in the same exact curve as these two bottom areas, so that way, you'll be able to naturally see a difference between them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start over here, and I'm gonna kind of ignore, even though I'm gonna paint over it, I don't wanna get confused with those lines, so with the white lines. So I'm just gonna kind of try to ignore them as I go through this process, and I wanna get a different angle here. So I'm gonna start curving mine a little bit more here. Make sure I am doing a little bit similar line here, which is fine. I'm gonna start to curve a little bit more. There we go. We've got a nice curve going on here. And see, you can see those other little peekaboo spots in through there. And it can come all the way up this side and just kind of enter in this little area up here. And now I'm gonna go ahead and do the ones in the opposite direction, and I'm gonna again curve them down. So just curving it down like this. And you don't have to go one for one, you know, you don't have to just start at the same one, you know, up at the top. But again, you want to be able to kind of have peekaboo spots throughout them, so I can still see a little bit of the white mesh underneath. And I've got just a few more to go here. And you know, if you accidentally go at the same angle, it's okay. You're inevitably gonna see a little bit of it through there anyways. And then we are gonna use this same brush for the next step. So once you get that net all done, you can wash and dry that small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put the ropes on the hammock so it has, you know, so it doesn't remain floating like it, or levitating like it is right now. So how I'm gonna do this is I'm just gonna do kind of a basic construction of the ropes that in my head would make it kind of stay up. So I'm gonna do like a top of a triangle that's pointing towards the tree on each of them to start. I'm going to be using white and my pre-mixed gray. I'll do more white on this one and more gray on that one. So how I do this is I'm going to just kind of make the top of a triangle that's going to look like it's, again, kind of leaning towards the tree. And then I make a bunch of little just kind of lines in between that. I'm going to make a line that connects it to the tree, something like that. And then I make a rope that goes around the tree, something like this. And if you want to get fancy and do a shadow underneath it, have fun. I'm also going to do a kind of a piece of brace or something in through there. Maybe I'll put a little gray on it so you can have a little definition. And then maybe a little button or something up at the top. You can really have fun with like whatever kind of little detailed rope details, knot details that you know. Maybe you were a Boy Scout and you know all kinds of fancy knots and stuff. I not so much. So I'm gonna do this one. Of course, this one's gonna be bigger. So, because it's closer, I'm going to use a little bit more gray on this side because it's the underside and it's not getting as much of the sun. And I'm just going to the corner. I'm going to go make a rope to the tree. It can be at the same angle or at a slightly different angle, whatever works. I got to do one that goes around the tree. I bump it out a little bit on that side so it gives the illusion that it's actually wrapping around. Then, of course, you can do these kind of lines that are coming in through here. And I'm just getting them to kind of meet the piece of wood. We'll put some fun like fringes on that in a minute. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this little piece in through here. That's just an extra stability piece for your little hammock so it doesn't fall down. And again, if you want to add any little shadows or anything, feel free to do that. And then we are going to use this small brush for the next step. So after you get your ropes on here, you can wash and dry that small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the base coat for our hat and pillow that are going to be resting on the hammock. I'm going to use my small brush and I'm just going to use white paint. I'm using this as like a primer coat, so when we go to put the colors on later, it's going to be way easier for us to get nice vibrant colors. So I'm just going to do a couple of basic shapes and just paint them white. And if you can see through them and see behind it, don't worry about it. I'm going to put my pillow is going to be over the edge of my hammock, and it's just going to kind of be like a rectangle, kind of a soft rectangle, not with pointy edges. And then my hat is going to be laying on top of it, so you're probably only going to see a portion of it right now. I'm going to do kind of a circle for the top of the hat and then just a little brimmy part for underneath it, and I'm just putting it in the top left-hand corner of my pillow. And that's all I'm going to do for my base coat on those two things, and then I'm going to wash and dry this brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so what we're doing for the next step is we are painting the fringe on our hammock. So I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using a combination of white and my gray. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do like these little buttons or knots at the end of each one of these lines, and then there's going to be some fringe coming off of it. And then I'll do the same thing on this one, only smaller. And then I'm going to have some fringe coming down just this outside edge of the hammock. So I'm going to start with a little bit of white and gray on my brush, and I'm just going to make myself some buttons or knots up here. And they can be of equal size, you know, whatever works visually for you is fine by me. But I'm just kind of making these like circle kind of things. And then I'm going to just use, you know, the gray and white, and I'm going to just kind of flick down some fun pieces at the bottom of it. And it can come past the bottom of the wood piece as long as you're using like a contrasting color. So if you've got gray down here, you'd want to use a little bit more white in order to be able to see it. And you know, again, this is just a fun part of this. You know, this is where it comes to life. You know, you can imagine, you know, you're taking a nap. Maybe there's a little table over here with a little margarita on it or something. You know, just this is it. This is the part where it, you know, we're adding the party into our maybe just nap. Nap is much more exciting to me than a party at these days. But you can certainly have fun with whatever little fringy stuff you want. I'm going to put some buttons in through here, some little knots or buttons. And then I'm not pressing hard, so I can just get a couple of little fringies coming off of this one. And this one I'm not really doing much, just a little tiny details. And then when I come off of here, you can make these fringes as long as you want. I've had people put colors in their fringes. They've done like the blue, they've done we're going to be putting red on our hat. So I've had people put red fringes. You can really have a bunch of fun putting it at, you know, getting this little life of the party on here. It's just a really fun part. And if you needed to, if, you know, again, if you're running through some wet paint and it's not working for you, just dry it or wait a couple of minutes. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. I'm just making sure I've got enough life in my little fringes here. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to use this same brush for the next step, but I'm going to wash it and dry it. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm painting the details on my pillow and my hat. My biggest trick here is I don't use a lot of paint. So as I'm going through the process, my paint actually dries on me and I can keep building layers, and that's how I get a little bit of dimension to it. So I'm just going to make my hat like kind of a straw color. I'm going to have a little red flower on the side of it, and I'm just going to have my pillow like white/gray just so it looks a little fluffy. I mean, when you're doing these, you could put a book there, you could put a laptop, you could put, you know, whatever is the thing that makes you relax. But you could do different shapes hats, you could put a cowboy hat or a baseball hat or whatever. You can totally have fun. But I'm just going to go with a nice kind of summer type hat. I'm going to be using white, yellow, brown, and red are going to be the colors that I use in here. I might use a little of my gray too. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start with a touch of brown on my brush, and I'm going to give myself like a little shadowy area around where the brim meets the top of the hat. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a shadowy area at the bottom of that rim. And now that I've got that on there, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just touching my brush a little bit into the yellow and a tiny bit into the white. Again, I don't use a lot of paint. And I'm going to color in my hat in this little, like, kind of an earthy straw color. You could certainly use a little bit of that rust on there too, that rust color, that burnt sienna, if that color is appealing to you. You can certainly modify this hat. Maybe you want a green hat. You've got some green color on your palette. You could certainly have a nice green hat. It's all up to you. Or maybe you'll have a red hat and a yellow flower. Whatever works for you is totally fine by me. And then while my hat is kind of drying, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another layer on my pillow. So I want this to be nice and fluffy, so I've got to have it so it's not too see-through here. So I'm going to use a little bit of that gray just to make sure I've got some good coverage on there. And then once I've got some good coverage, then I'll pop in maybe a little highlight on the top just to make it look a little bit poofier. While that's drying, I'm going to go do my flower. So I'm using some red paint right now. And I'm just kind of making myself, you know, kind of maybe a little red daisy. I don't know if there are red daisy. Daisies come in all different kinds of colors. So we're going to call this a red daisy. I just did a little bit of, you know, just petals around the edges. I'm doing a little yellow and white dot in the middle. I'm gonna make this red a little bit brighter in through here. And then I'm gonna put a touch of a highlight on the top of my hat here. Just wiped my brush real quick. Put a little bit of a highlight in through here. And, you know, because my paint is drying nice and fast, because I'm not using a lot, that allows me to just kind of keep modifying these colors as I go, you know, because I did, you know, one layer and it's like, oh, I want that a little brighter or a little bit darker. So I'm just kind of working on it as it's drying. I'm going to put a little bit more white over here on my pillow, make sure it's nice and puffy. And then that, to me, looks pretty darn good. And we do have one little step to go, and we're going to do it with this small brush. So once you get your accessories on your hammock, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is the last step of the painting, which is going to be birds in your sky. So these could be seagulls, they could be pelicans, something seaworthy off in the distance. I'm just going to make 2 or 3 little tiny ones. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm not into super black birds off in the distance, so I'm going to use a little bit of black and white on my brush at the same time, so that way I'm going to accidentally get a little bit of dimension in it. I'm going to make the birds that I learned how to make in first grade, which are just kind of that wide M. So I'm going to go ahead. Sometimes they look like check marks. What happens is I do like one side that's going to be longer than the other, and you can do them in different directions. Just don't press hard. So maybe I'm going to put one up here too. So you can have as many as you want. They could be whatever kind of bird you imagine them to be. I wish I knew the name of more birds so I could spout them off for you. I'm sure there's lots of different kinds of birds that flock by the ocean. I just marked up my canvas, which I will get rid of that in a minute. But that's all I'm going to do for my birds. You can have a whole bunch of them, just different sizes, different angles. Have fun with it. And we do have a little tiny detail that needs to be done on every painting. That's going to be done with this brush. So wash it and dry it for that little tiny detail to come. All right, so we are on to the final step of any painting, which is to sign it. I'm going to be signing mine in the, I'm going to go bottom left this time. I'm using black paint. I'm using my small brush. I do my initials. You could certainly do your first name. You could do the date. You could sign it in the tree. You know, you could totally have fun with this, or sign it in the sand like you wrote it with your toes or something. Have fun with it. That's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoy the process. I hope you love your painting as much as I do, and that you can hear your birds singing and your seagulls making their awesome noise and the breeze blowing by, and you've just kind of escaped for a little while into your painting. And I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.